For Complex News, I'm Hanuman Welch. As 2018 thankfully draws to a welcome end, we know that 2019 will be here before we know it, alongside a whole new run of MCU titles. Off the rip, we know that 2019 is set to deliver Captain Marvel, Avengers 4, and Spider-Man Far From Home as tentpole entries, but it's the 2020 Phase 4 movies we're looking at more closely, since it's the clearest picture yet of what the MCU will look like post-Infinity War. Now, Marvel won't officially announce their Phase 4 movies until San Diego Comic-Con in July of next year, but the 2020 run of releases is shaping up even before next summer's events in San Diego. According to a new report from that hashtag show, which clarifies what movies will land in the 2020 release dates that Marvel has staked out. According to them, Black Widow will be a May 1st, 2020 release, while The Eternals will be a 2020 November 16th release. Chloe Zhao is set to direct The Eternals, and according to earlier reports, the studio has a script that they like, and when they moved on Zhao, they had hoped things would come together quickly enough to begin production next year. Originally created by Jack Kirby, the story of The Eternals is set millions of years ago when the cosmic beings known as the Celestials genetically experimented on humans, creating the superpowered individuals as well as their more villainous offshoots known as the Deviants. Now, the two groups, the Deviants and the Eternals, went on to battle each other throughout history to see which would eventually become the ultimate race. About the Eternals, that hashtag show revealed, quote, "We are told that the script by Matthew and Ryan Firpo was more heavily influenced by Kirby's 1976 work and will not only introduce the worlds of the Eternals and the Deviants, but also connect to several existing characters, leaving doors open for the introductions of any number of new ones and establish a deep history of the MCU." Personally, I'm deliriously stoked at the idea of introducing the Eternals into the MCU. Just look at the success of Thor Ragnarok. If that level of space Vikings on acid and Jack Kirby-inspired cosmic madness was something that clicked with you, then good news, the Eternals are cut from the same cloth. As the MCU moves further and further away from the confines of Earthbound reality, what with the introduction of the Quantum Realm and Ant-Man and the mystical realms of Doctor Strange, the MCU can stand to do with a little more weirdness. Since the Eternals are basically a race of gods, it'll be fascinating to see how Chloe Zhao humanizes the characters and how they'll fit into the larger tapestry of the cosmic MCU. Odin and the Eternals have tangled in the pages of Thor dozens of times in the past, and ratcheting it up to Jack Kirby has already proved to be a successful strategy for Marvel. With their connection to the Celestials, who were introduced into the MCU by way of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, the Eternals could be a way to introduce an entire new avenue of your more cosmic-leaning entities like Galactus, or even using the genetic experimentation angle to finally get mutants into the MCU. And speaking of Phase 4 and the Guardians of the Galaxy, the final entry in the planned trilogy seems to be on indefinite hold after the high-profile departure of James Gunn from the project earlier this summer. Who knows if or when we'll get another standalone Guardians joint, but we do know that Gunn turned in a first draft of Volume 3 before some decade-old tweets taken out of context turned out to be enough for Disney to cut him loose. Interestingly enough, Gunn is rumored to be heading across the street to DC and Warner Brothers to potentially helm the sequel to Suicide Squad as both the director and the screenwriter for the second entry in that series. Now, a project we know that will definitely be a tentpole entry for Phase 4 is the sequel to Black Panther. Writer and director Ryan Coogler will return for BP2 following the first movie's $1.3 billion in worldwide ticket sales and high watermark for Marvel in diversifying its cinematic universe. While the cast for the sequel has not been announced, Chadwick Boseman will obviously reprise his role as Black Panther T'Challa, the King of Wakanda. Even though Black Panther was wiped out by Thanos, along with half the Marvel superhero population with the snap finger at the end of Infinity War, Black Panther 2 all but guarantees that his death will be reversed by the end of Avengers 4 next year, or Black Panther 2 could be a prequel. Expected to return, Lupita Nyong'o, Dana Garai, Letitia Wright, Winston Duke, and Daniel Kaluuya will all reprise their roles, and there have even been reports that Michael B. Jordan could return somehow as Eric Killmonger. Donald Glover is also reportedly in talks to join the sequel as well in some capacity. As far as the story goes, that's the big mystery, but Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige gave some hints of the story process during an interview with Entertainment Weekly in March. One of the favorite pastimes at Marvel Studios is sitting around on a Part 1 talking and dreaming about what we would do in a Part 2. There have been plenty of those conversations as we were putting together the first Black Panther. We have ideas and a pretty solid direction on where we want to head with the second one. Potential Black Panther speculation, strictly from my own perspective, should include Shuri inheriting the mantle of Black Panther in her own right at some point. It may be in the time between T'Challa's death at the hands of Thanos and his inevitable reintegration into the mortal plane. Shuri could become Queen of Wakanda and take on the role of Black Panther as she has in the pages of Black Panther in the past. The character was wildly popular following her debut in the MCU earlier this year, and she's already in the middle of her own Marvel series. With Shuri as a fan favorite, crossovers and her exploring the world outside the boundaries of Wakanda seemed like an alley-oop Marvel Studios wouldn't want to miss. And finally, one last potential heavy hitter allegedly heading for a 2020 release window is a potential Black Widow solo joint. Now, according to that earlier report from that hashtag show, Black Widow could be looking to take advantage of the production incentives by filming in Croatia. Director Kate Shortland is set to helm the standalone espionage flick, which is already in pre-production. According to a synopsis, the standalone film will find Natasha Romanoff living in the United States 15 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. So, doing a little rough math, that puts Natasha in the US in the mid-2000s, well before the formation of the Avengers proper, but this could be setting up Natasha for her induction into S.H.I.E.L.D. At this point in the MCU timeline, there's a possibility of her being a post-Soviet free agent or a potential mercenary element who could find herself captured and flipped by none other than Nick Fury himself. What do you think of Marvel's planned run of 2020 offerings? Let us know, and for everything else, subscribe to Complex on YouTube. For Complex News, I'm Hanuman Welch.